So what exactly was going on here? Well, Europeans were seeking new trade routes, different from the ones they already had. Because trade meant a lot of things. It meant wealth. It also meant new spices, luxury goods, and things that they just couldn't get in their own backyard. But how were they going to get there? Well, as we discussed in the first unit, or the last unit, the center of trade was the Mediterranean, which is a big reason why the Renaissance began in Italy and why those city-states were getting so wealthy. Because if people from Europe wanted to trade with the East or Northern Africa or any of those other places, they really had to go through the Mediterranean, unless if they wanted to go by land, and water was much more efficient. So here we see the boat in the Mediterranean. That was the center of trade right there. See, that was the world. But things started to change, and the world started to seem to get smaller and bigger all at the same time, because now the center of trade moved from the Mediterranean Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. So now instead of just bypassing the sea, the ships could go to the west coast of Africa, to the east coast of Africa, and on to places like India and Asia and so forth. And this is all because, remember, they wanted to bypass Italy. Why do we have to pay all these tolls and port fees and all these things to Italy if we can find our own way around? Because as people used to try to trade, the Italians would say fermata, which is halt in Italian, I think. So can there be other routes was their question. And yes, the Atlantic was the new route. So we all learned that Italy controlled trade from the Renaissance. But who controlled trade next? Who did that would be the country that would start to lead the way in exploration. And the country that started to lead the way in exploration is Portugal. Think about it. They're on the Atlantic Ocean, access to the Atlantic. Sort of makes sense. There's some other reasons why they led the way in exploration. They got some help. Prince Henry of Portugal set up navigation schools so people can learn how to use the tools of navigation and the routes and all the things that navigators would need to know. Now keep in mind, Prince Henry and Prince Harry are two different people. We're talking about Prince Henry, not Prince Harry. Prince Harry is the one married to Meghan Markle. Prince Henry is the one that said, "Don't be a fool, stay in navigation school." Okay, so I'm going to actually show you a part of another video I used for my last YouTube channel, for my last district. Instead of recreating every single thing, there's a few things worth seeing. So besides motivating factors being trade, there were some other factors as well. One, it being that it felt that it was their duty to convert non-Christians. As there were other people who didn't practice Christianity throughout the globe, some explorers and countries thought like, hey, we should convert those people. Remember, this is also the time during the Protestant Reformation, so the Catholic Church was eager to find more Catholics throughout the world. In fact, Bartholomew Diaz said his duty was to serve God and His Majesty, meaning like God and the King. Notice the navigation tool he's using there. Some of us are going to learn about that in our next class. And that's also his coat of arms there on the left. Now, technology made exploration possible. The caravel was a new type of ship, and it could be used so that it could actually sail into the wind. Think how hard it would be to go across the ocean if you relied on it going in one direction. That triangular sails is part of the way that was possible. We're going to learn more about these technologies in the next lesson. I'm just giving you a little quick overview right now. We have the astrolabe and also the compass. And if you can see the words there in parentheses, it's showing that these came from other parts of the world. That was we learned in the last unit that the Renaissance wasn't even possible if they didn't get some of the technologies from Eastern kingdoms and Islamic kingdoms and things like that. Some other things from that other video that I'd like to share. So we mentioned Diaz, but there's many other explorers. But first they're going around Africa. Actually, let me show you this here. Right? They would trade gold, ivory, and unfortunately also get slaves around there. We're going to get more into the slave trade in a future lesson. So after they would land on the west coast. Eventually, they made it around the east coast and then on to Asia. So Diaz was the first one to make it around Africa, and da Gama explored the East African coast. So you see there's like little steps along the way. Then by 1498, they got to southwestern India, and they acquired their silks, gems, and spices and things like that. Now, Spain also made claims, right? Now, we all know that Columbus tried to shorten the way going around Africa onto Asia by going west, not knowing that, oh, the New World would be in the way, right? He didn't even realize that it was a new place yet. He thought he did land in the west for a really long time. So after that happens, well, that was a little fancy, wasn't it? Let me move this on here. So after this happened, tension grew between Spain and Portugal, because Portugal's like, hey, we're leading the way. What are you doing, Spain? And once the New World came, they started to sort of like argue over all this new land. So the Pope at the time, remember we said in the last unit, was more than a religious leader. They were also like a political leader, made this line of demarcation saying, Spain, you get this half, Portugal, you get half. And then 1494, the Treaty of Tordesillas made it official. Now notice, it looks like Portugal gets much smaller space, right? That's because they didn't know how far west that continent went yet. Also notice that's why Brazilians speak Portuguese. Okay, so Portugal's trading empire was huge. They took control of the spice trade from the Muslims at the time, and eventually they controlled the Straits of Hormuz, which if you see right there. In 1510, they captured Goa in West India. You might notice that a lot of people from Western India have Portuguese last names, not a coincidence. By 1511, they controlled the Strait of Malacca. Indonesia, big place for wealth and spices. It's still a really important economic center today, right? So Portugal's like, we control this, we control that, we control this. Portugal's taken over the globe at this point. Italy, declining in power. Portugal increasing in power. Okay, but that wouldn't remain forever, right? Because everyone wants a piece of that pie, so to speak. So who is it going to be next? All right, they brought back the goods at a lower price. Another reason why Italy was sort of replaced by Portugal. So now more countries wanted to explore. Hey, look what Portugal's doing. We went in on this. So nations challenged them. Took a while, but by the 1600s, the Dutch and the English were like, it's our turn. Now we're going to start like exploring and taking over places and trade. And by 1581, the Netherlands declared independence from Spain because of what they were gaining. They set up the East India Company, and the Dutch eventually pushed the English out of that group. The Dutch set trading outposts all over the globe. By 1619, their trading headquarter was in Java. They ruled lots of Indonesia, so no longer the Portuguese, right? And then all these places that the Portuguese used to control, now the Dutch controlled. Also the Cape of Good Hope on the tip of Africa. So I'm going through this quickly, but what you want to see is that it was global competition because money is involved and power is involved, right? And so things started changing hands. That's the Cape of Good Hope, and that's the Dutch saying, yo, that's mine now. Okay, and because of that, Amsterdam became the leading commercial center in the entire world. There were also British and French traders. The East India Company established trade ports in India, and eventually they colonized them. We'll get into that at the age of imperialism. Then you have the French East India Company by the late 1600s. They were a little bit more limited with their contact, though, as the other groups we just mentioned. So this was a quick overview, but what you want to know is that Italy was no longer the center of trade. And we'll get into all the things about technology and stuff later. All right, have a great evening, and I'll see you guys next class. Okay.
Did it work?
I don't know. Let's see.